First I'd like to congratulate the Prime Minister on completing 9 years in office and having won two successive absolute majorities. And I believe one thing: no government can be seen through the prism of entirely black or entirely white. We should avoid these polarities. There are some achievements, there are some more achievements that could have perhaps been attained, and there are some weaknesses. And we should carry out a balance sheet as objectively as possible. To my mind, some of the achievements of Mr. Modi's Sarkar have been economic reform. We have the insolvency law, we have the REDA law, and other measures by which ease of doing business, as reflected also in global indexes, has improved. Secondly, I think the entire infrastructure of welfareism through fine tuning and expanding the reach of direct benefit transfers, especially during COVID times and after, has been an achievement. And it is something that, given the level of poverty in this country, has benefited the poor. Thirdly, I think this government has had a successful foreign policy. Foreign policy is a matter of national consensus. So I don't take a partisan view on it. I think by and large, Mr. Modi has represented India well, both in international forums, and has managed to keep India's image as an important player on the global scene intact. Fourthly, I think this government has done more than any government in the past to improve, strengthen, reinforce our border infrastructure. I think that was neglected in the past. We have two hostile neighbors, Pakistan and China, and particularly where China is concerned, there was a considerable asymmetry between the Chinese level of infrastructure on their side of the border and our preparations to deal with it. The government has given attention to it, and which I'm happy for. Now, just like there are pluses, there are negatives also. The negatives, in my view, are that I don't think we have seen this level of social disharmony ever in the past. The policy of Hindutva, and I have nothing against the word Hindutva, but as a political weapon, which has aimed at the consolidation of the Hindu vote, has created unfortunate divides in society, which, in my view, are also inimical for ultimately economic well-being, development and progress, because such disharmony leads to endemic instability. And endemic instability is anti the right focus on, as the Prime Minister wanted, Sabka Vikas. So we need much more to be done on Sabka Saath and Sabka Vishwas. That is one thing that I feel this government has needs to do. Secondly, I think that in some areas the government's authoritarian policies, in other words, we are a democracy, and I'm proud that we are the world's largest democracy, and I believe democracy is flourishing in India. But in some manner, when governments have absolute majorities, or in the Lok Sabha and a managed majority in the Rajya Sabha, there are attempts to short circuit the normal democratic process. As, for instance, happened when the farm laws were passed within an hour without sufficient discussion, debate, or wider consultation, with its own consequences. And sometimes the misuse of draconian laws against those who are critical of the government, and any democracy should allow for dissent. So, the penalizing of dissent is something the government should introspect about. Thirdly, I think we need a proper, objective, independent audit of how the welfareism, which is creditable and which the government has done through DBT, is actually functioning beyond statistics. How much of it is reaching the actual beneficiary, and how much of it is still being, in spite of the DBT, being siphoned off by corruption at the lower levels. These are areas which the government should focus on. Fourthly, I think there is a perception that there is a misuse of central agencies, investigative agencies like ED or CBI, or agencies like the income tax, where statistics show that mostly on the radar, the target of investigation or punitive action are those in the opposition. And I think such an image is not the best thing for India's image abroad and for India's own democratic health. At this stage, the BJP's strength are verifiable. They have a leader, a face, who enjoys high popularity, is charismatic, whose eloquence is perhaps unmatched today. He has become a brand. They have a narrative. We may or may not agree with the narrative, but they have a narrative which consists of Hindutva. And part of Hindutva, I have myself said, was needed because we needed to rectify the earlier mistakes made in the name of secularism, both in the narrative of history and perhaps sometimes in using minorities excessively as vote bank politics. I think that needs rectification, but they have a narrative, Hindutva. They have a narrative on hyper-nationalism, where they have successfully, in fact, projected that they are the keepers of patriotism, and they have a monopoly on how you define nationalism. Thirdly, I think that they have a narrative on welfareism. And fourthly, they have consciously widened their own support base beyond the forward caste. The BJP has a weakness. Weakness is that by and large, their support base was the forward caste. And the BJP typically, as an electoral machine, realized that this was perhaps too narrow a base. So they have consciously tried to co-opt the OBCs in large sections. So I think these are their strengths, and of course, and most importantly, they have an organized cadre. The cadre and organizational machinery of the BJP, which is a 24/7 electoral machine, and the RSS cadre on the ground. I think these are their strengths. Their final strength is the weakness of the opposition. The opposition is divided. And the opposition, in some manner or the other, acts in a manner as though it's an ally of the BJP. By that I mean, it's not a dramatic statement. It means that if you divide the opposition votes by divisions within a united opposition, then you strengthen the BJP's ability to win. So, these I think are the BJP's strengths. Its weaknesses are that it is by and large, its catchment area is North India. If you see the degree of penetration in the south, below the Vindhyas, is limited and if not negligible. I mean, Karnataka was there, that too has gone to the Congress. So, their strength is that in the north, in a majority of seats, their opposition is the Congress. And the Congress, being organizationally weak, the BJP's strike rate against the Congress was in 2019 as high as 96%. So, in at least 250 seats, the BJP picks up a certain number of seats, which it understands it needs to increase. Therefore, the foray into the northeast. Therefore, the aggression with which the BJP is trying to fight Telangana. Therefore, the fight that they put up even in Karnataka. So, I think right now, as we move towards 2024, if I have to sum it up, it's rather late in the day for the opposition to come together, not as an arithmetical unity. You see, gathering on stage of leaders of political parties holding hands together is not opposition unity. The opposition needs organic unity, whereby, which is a far more difficult task, you sit on the drawing board and agree that each party will strengthen and fight unitedly with that party which is strongest in its own region, so as to put up, wherever possible, a joint opposition to the BJP. I don't think the opposition is anywhere close to it now. And there, of course, the role of the Congress is the key, because the Congress rightly believes, perhaps, because it was the mother of all parties, that it cannot abdicate its role, or rather limited it only to those states where it is the leading party. And so it must contest even those parties in the opposition who are stronger in their own region. So what it leads is a division of votes. So the Congress fights KCR in Telangana to the advantage of the BJP. The Congress fights Mamta in West Bengal to the advantage of the BJP. The Congress fights AAP in Delhi, or AAP as we see it now in Punjab, to the advantage of the BJP. So a divided opposition is a great asset to the BJP, and I think the opposition has, for the last 9 years, not put in the enough intellectual and organizational rigor to do more about it than merely be strong in their own silos, in their own bastions. So, they lack a narrative, they lack a face, they lack an organizational network on the ground, and they lack a pan-Indian joint strategy. So, these are, given this, I think the BJP, as it seems now, has an advantage for 2024, but politics is dynamic. When the mood changes, it's difficult to predict how they will perform, whether it will be a repeat of an absolute majority or not, where there will be erosion of seats. Because I want to make one point clear. In spite of the achievements of the BJP, which I recognize, there are legitimate discontents in the people. I think unemployment is a very big factor. Price rise is a big factor. Post-COVID, the impact of joblessness, prices on the middle class has been quite substantive, and in fact on the poor even more. So there is there are legitimate discontents, including on the issue of social inclusion, which could form a narrative for the opposition on a pan Indian basis, but they have not been able to develop it. And anti Modism cannot become the only plank on which you oppose or fight the BJP. I think that for a party which had an absolute majority, the degree of economic reform leaves still much to be desired. This is the time of for India's opportunity in the world, with a China in decline, with an isolated China. The world is looking at India. And the degree of economic reform that could have been achieved by a government with an absolute majority, I think, remains an unfinished agenda. Then there are other promises which are used, I think, by the BJP more rhetorically rather than as something that they are keen to implement. Like, for instance, the Uniform Civil Code. It's there in every manifesto. But merely saying you want a Uniform Civil Code is not enough. They have not even brought a draft bill for it. Twice it was said that it's coming, but it was withdrawn. The National Law Commission itself has said it's not feasible. Because when you draw up a uniform civil code, you have to go through the grinding process of seeing what needs to be eliminated from every religion and included. And therefore, you need a draft that is acceptable to this multi-religious nation. In fact, I was working with Mr. Nitish Kumar as his advisor and a member of parliament in Rajya Sabha when he had received a letter from the Law Commission on his thoughts on the Uniform Civil Code. And this is exactly what we said. We said that for a Uniform Civil Code, which we support, which is part of the directive principles of the Constitution, where is the draft? Where is the basic template on which we can build? So merely using it as a slogan doesn't work. I'm just giving you one example. You see, it's difficult to compare leaders, each of their own strengths, and Prime Minister Modi is the Prime Minister of the entire country. Yes, in a democracy, one can disagree with what the Prime Minister says, but I think the foundational role that Jawaharlal Nehru had in ensuring that a newly independent country, which was a collection of many diversities. There is an underlying unity in this civilization, but the diversities are manifest, multi-religious, multicultural, multilingual, multi-ethnic. His foundational role in ensuring that India remains a democracy, his strong belief in democracy, and his strong belief in a policy of inclusion, which some critics can say went too far. And I am one of those sometimes. But nevertheless, the ability to keep this vast nation together and to lay the foundations of democracy was the role of Jawaharlal Nehru in the formative years of our republic. After that, we have other prime ministers who have in their own way contributed. I can name Indira Gandhi in spite of the emergency, her tenure. We have had Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who was the first BJP Prime Minister whose ability to be more inclusive while running a coalition government was admirable. And he was a personal friend. I translated his poetry into English. We knew each other well. I think Mr. Modi has brought, through the absolute majority he worked for and in a sense became a mascot of and guaranteed, he has been a unifying figure for the country in terms of governance because of an absolute majority. But I will still say that Prime Minister Modi has not sufficiently fulfilled his own slogan when he came to power of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, because this country needs a far more sensitive touch in the policy, dominant policy of inclusion rather than exclusion. Well, I think first and foremost they will try and encash the image of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In fact, one of the problems for the BJP or an asset, depends on how you look at it, is the disproportionate dependence on one figure alone, Prime Minister Modi. And sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. We have seen in assembly elections where you have left it only to Prime Minister Modi to pull the irons out of the fire for the BJP. It has given their campaign a boost, but not sufficiently. In a parliamentary election, perhaps because the opposition is weak, it doesn't have a face, it doesn't yet have a narrative or an organizational rigor. This mascot, this image, this persona of Prime Minister Modi will be one thing the BJP will encash upon. Secondly, without a doubt, will remain the policy of Hindutva or Hindu consolidation. But my fear is that it has now been overused. And I think the people of India are never underestimate the wisdom of the people. They know when a policy is genuinely seeking to rectify an earlier lack of balance or asserting a natural sense of pride in a particular aspect of our civilization, and where it is being used as a means to deflect attention from more serious problems which need attention. They will use hyper-nationalism also. And we know how it has played a role in the past. I mean, we are proud of the fact that we had Balakot and we had Pulwama, but it made a difference to the electoral results because it showed a government that could act in the national interest. So, nationalism and hyper-nationalism will be used. But again, if at the base and pyramid of society, endemic and serious problems remain, including that of unemployment, falling incomes, and not enough improvement of quality of life, because expectations are rising. We must be today one of the most unequal societies in the world, where the number of billionaires is growing and the number of the poor is increasing. So that has to be seen whether these strategies will work as effectively as they did in 2014 and 19. I think these are the planks, and some of their achievements which I listed right in the beginning will also be to the credit of the BJP. You see, they are important because every election is important. But there is a fundamental difference between how the voter votes in assembly elections and how she votes for parliamentary elections. And there is little doubt that the same voter in Karnataka may choose to vote for the BJP in a parliamentary election or rather for Mr. Modi, whereas it threw the BJP out in an assembly election. That difference has to remain, and actually it's proven by facts. Before 2019, the Congress won Rajasthan, it won Madhya Pradesh, it won Chhattisgarh. But the BJP in the parliamentary election won all parliamentary seats in Rajasthan. For instance, where in the assembly Congress had won. So this aspect is something that must be. But if the BJP loses Madhya Pradesh, I think the BJP will win Rajasthan. Or if it loses in Chhattisgarh again, it does strengthen the morale and the minds and opinions of people when you are seeking an absolute majority for the third time. I think it could be a factor, but we must bear in mind the difference between how the voter votes in assemblies and how the voter votes in a parliamentary election.